Yeah.
We're live. So hello,
Hello.
anybody who is most likely watching this in our future. So we're technically in your past right now. Hello to the glimpse to the past. Because nobody ever watches this show live. We need to find a way to get, it's my responsibility, need to find a way to get some live viewers. Well, that we don't have
I'm
any.
fine with not having to do anything, so.
Yeah, well, it is my channel, so it's my responsibility.
There you
go. And today we are discussing chapters 13 through 16, if I recall what I said.
Yes.
So we're just staying on that 13 to 16?
Just gonna catch up with the week we missed and pick up pace.
Okay.
That. So, trying to remember exactly. I probably should have read this again since last week, but I got so sucked into working on the comic I was working on. So let me flip forward to the end of 16 so I can remember where before I give a synopsis of it. I believe it ended right at Magrathea.
Yes, pretty much like whenever Magrathea got revealed.
Okay.
That it is, in fact, Magrathea.
Yes.
Yeah. So, what was going on in this last few chapters, starting with 13, is everybody is having a hard time getting over everything that's going on. In fact, they just reveal that what is his face? Ford and Zaphod know each other personally because they're related, and that while he's trying to introduce his semi-cousin to Arthur and Zaphod had already had a run-in with each other as well, when he basically snagged the girl he was trying to woo over from a party, who also turns out to be Trillian in the other room, or Trisha McMillan. So everybody in this weird turn of events kind of knows each other, except Ford is somewhat of the odd one when it comes to our fourth member of the party. After finding out everything that happens, Trisha finds out that the Earth blew up. Everybody's having a really hard time sleeping. And that's fine because the computer finally solves the improbability equation that finds them to the mythical planet of Magrathea, in which there's this long kind of philosophical argument between Ford and Zaphod as to whether this actually could be Magrathea, and even if it could, would it really be worth anything? And that's pretty much where everything left off. So let's dig into it. Was there anything that really stuck out to anybody?
Honestly, I completely forgot about reading chapter 13. I read everything else, but I completely forgot about 13.
There wasn't that as much in 13. Mainly the reveal that Ford and Zaphod are semi-cousins and that Trillian knows Arthur at the party.
And that apparently Zaphod remove one of his heads, or at least disguise it, because he was a single-headed man at the party.
Yeah.
He only had 2 arms.
Yeah.
And I think he named himself Phil.
Yeah.
On how
I just
go on.
I just think it's interesting that there's a lot to do with the improbability drive, I think. Just the improbability that all 4 of them would end up together. And they all know each other to some degree.
Yeah.
And I think it's still part of the effects of the improbability drive. So it's interesting that the improbability drive still works even in the past, technically.
Well, I mean, going based on like Einsteinian, or Einsteinian would be the proper word, but everybody freaks out when you say Einsteinian principle of how time flows is that we're just experiencing it in the chronological order that our perception perceives it. So for an improbability drive, something that could truly basically bend around the probable reality, dealing with the past like that isn't as improbable as it seems.
Well, it's like you have 4 people who it would be like with the space of everything and the time of everything, it'd be highly improbable for them all to know each other and then meet each other in the vastness of space. Then you get the whole improbability drive, which is like, well, screw that, and then so yeah, plot device the spaceship part.
Well, what I find is even more like the most improbable part of this is less of the 2 aliens involved, because you can kind of like see the reasoning for why these 2 aliens are involved and stuff like that. And yeah, it's highly improbable they happen to be related. But I find the biggest logic is that the only 2 remaining humans of everybody who is on Earth happen to have already known each other.
Yeah.
Like, that's just crazy. That's like a 1 in at the time, like 6 billion chance.
It's highly improbable.
Like, I believe this is a kind of critique on how fiction works in general. Using this drive of like, this is very improbable that any of this would happen. That's him saying it's like, yeah, it's kind of dumb how journeymen always end up coming together, and it turns out, oh, they knew each other all along. Well, what are the odds of that? And this seems like a it's like kind of like a comment on fiction on a whole.
It's like it's a small world kind of trope where it's like everybody ends up knowing everybody at some point in time, especially whenever it's small and varied, where it's like no matter how big the universe is, you're still going to probably bump into someone at some point in time, and you're going to think it's just random chance.
Almost somewhat subverted by actually pulling in random chance as an explanation for it.
Yeah.
So. And even the improbability of Zaphod visiting the planet that Ford was trapped on and not knowing Ford was there. Because if Zaphod had picked Ford up, Ford wouldn't be in the Heart of Gold at this point. He wouldn't have been.
I have no trouble believing that he didn't know he was there, though.
No, I completely agree with considering how Zaphod's so flighty and just like momentarily and everything. It's like everything that he does is more of a thing of like he's there to begin with, just kind of cares, well, like doesn't really care whenever he's doing, whenever he's through there, and then he's like, well, on to the next thing.
Yeah.
So
it's also like
big,
but it's also a pretty big planet, all things considered. If you're actually parking somewhere and then hiking on foot to crash a party, it's like I've gone to
in England of all places
conventions and stuff like that, and it turned out somebody I knew was at the convention that day at that same time, and I just never ran into them or knew they were there till after the fact.
Yeah. I mean, you can kind of take Trillian's name as kind of like a look at how Zaphod works, because her name is pretty much a mish of her first 3 letters and like the last 4 letters of her name. So it's like whenever she was probably introducing herself to Zaphod, he probably only heard the first and last part of her name. And I was like, oh, cool, Trillian. I was like,
well, I don't remember if they kept it the same or not, but I think, at least in the movie, she describes that it was kind of her decision to space-ize her name by crushing them together. Surprised if it started out as a nickname from Zaphod either.
I didn't see anything.
Yeah. Well, I don't think they talk about it yet if it does happen, because they're about to go to the kitchen. That's actually where we leave off, is like everybody's trying to grasp the wonder of Magrathea, and then Arthur's just like, I know what I'm missing now. Is there tea on this ship? A British man.
Still a Thursday, mind you.
Yeah,
13
still a Thursday.
Still on a Thursday.
Yeah. Though he's been through many other points in time up to get back to this Thursday. Almost every point in time at the same time, in fact.
We do see more about Trillian, too, that she is as smart as we were led on to believe, because she has a degree in math and in astrophysics. So she's like, well, why not go with the alien?
Those 2 things would be related.
Oh, yeah. Because you could clearly see beforehand that she's really smart, and it just even more so.
Probably would have helped a whole lot if I actually read that chapter, because whenever I was reading the other ones, I was like, how does she know all this stuff? Oh, that's why she has a degree in astrophysics.
She has a degree in math and astrophysics.
Well, that explains that then.
Yeah. Her character too. If you know anything about the world, and I think the author is almost care if you know or not, so it doesn't really matter, but also relying on you knowing at the same time, that she already described that she would be Arabic.
Yes.
If Earth was still around. And she has a degree, and she's very droll and bored with things. That's why she showed up to a fancy dress party. She probably comes a very traditional household that pushed her to going to college and getting the degrees and stuff. And that's probably influenced her life. And that's probably where the whole little melancholy came from of this is boring. And that's why she ended up going with the, and you can pretty much just from this really short glimpse of her get a lot on no concrete detail of her life, but just the general image of what it was like up to this point.
Of just how she got pushed to become a mathematician, astrophysicist,
and how that's like chiseled away to the personality that she has today.
Like, as successful as she is, she doesn't feel like she's succeeding, so she just like does whatever she wants, including a fancy dress party.
Yeah, because she even says to Arthur, it's like, I either hitch a lift with the spaceman or go to the dole queue again on Monday. Like, very boring life considering all her accomplishments.
Living life to the fullest.
But often when you have degrees like that, you end up in a very droll life.
Yeah.
Most jobs that you get with those degrees aren't like fascinating planetarium jobs and stuff like that. Most of them are you're on a desk doing math for day in and day out. Maybe even checking somebody else's research, because peer reviewing is a very, very popular job and necessary, but it's not exactly the most glamorous job.
No. And then even just to think about the last two humans not only meet each other, but Arthur, there's nothing important about him. And then contrary, Trillian has the degrees and everything. Because Arthur, we don't really know. He probably is just average.
Well, we do have a good picture of each person, and I like how they are. Even if you include the robot too, Marvin, all five of the people involved here have five completely different character types. Like their background, who they are, everything's completely different, because you have the I'm kind of too smart and bored with all of this Trillian, but then you also have Arthur, who complains a lot, like any British man does. But we could probably tell what his radio show was like, because he had a radio job. That's what he said. And he said it was a very interesting radio job. So it was most likely that he actually had a talking position on it. Maybe, who knows where it was. So he was probably the type of guy that would complain about stuff on the radio, which everybody loves listening to.
Yeah.
Not the type of person who ends up having a lot of friends, but everybody loves listening to them. So you've got this guy who basically complains for a living, a person who has complaints, but up until the fact that she decided to skip off with an alien, never really did anything with those complaints. A guy who thinks he's the man of all men because, and that's not the one that I'm even talking about yet. He thinks he's the man of all men because he's the type of guy who can just go anywhere he wants in the galaxy for free, and thinks he knows a lot just because he's seen a lot, even though he's been trapped on Earth for the last 15 years and can't stand it when it seems like somebody knows a bit more about the situation than he can. I mean, he got furious when he noticed that Arthur and Zaphod had already met. And then you have this guy who actually is kind of the man of all men, because he is witty enough to be in that position, but he's also kind of like half a dipshit at the same time.
So you pretty much have someone who knows everything, someone who doesn't really know anything, someone who thinks they know everything but really knows nothing, and someone who knows, well, someone who does not know everything, and someone who knows everything but knows nothing.
Yeah. And then, you know, if you include Marvin, it is somebody who knows everything, but he doesn't want to do anything with it.
Yep.
So we pretty much have the cast of Seinfeld right here.
It's a book about nothing.
Yeah. You know, because in this very, very case sense, you have Elaine, who is actually probably the smartest one out of all of them, but makes the dumbest decisions. And there's Trillian right there. Then you have Kramer, which is clearly Ford. I mean, you could probably see almost like in the description too. It's like that reminds me of Cosmo Kramer. And Arthur is George Costanza.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Scary.
And Zaphod is
I
Jerry
can
Seinfeld.
see it. I can see it.
And Marvin is Newman, who is this genius guy, but everything in life makes him mad, and he just really plots around things.
So there
This
we
was
go.
Seinfeld before it was Seinfeld.
We've created the synopsis of Hitchhiker's Guide, which is Seinfeld, the sci-fi book.
Yeah, Seinfeld in space.
Seinfeld
Coming to theaters next year.
Oh man.
Hey, I'd watch it.
You're reading it.
I know.
Yeah. All right. Moving.
Yeah, that's pretty much it for chapter 13. We should probably just move on to 14 and onward now.
Yeah, I think so.
But if you take a test out there, listener,
So,
and you need an essay, definitely write about the similarities between the Hitchhiker's Guide and Seinfeld. I guarantee you'll get a D+.
D+.
Or your money back.
which you got it for free, so you get no money back.
Shh, don't ruin it.
That's the joke.
Okay, so
14, 15, and 16, because they pretty much all just like mashed together.
yeah, that's pretty much where we're at. Let's see where we're starting. Blah 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 blah.
So we're at the
Trapdoor.
point where like they finally get some downtime and they're heading towards Magrathea, even though Zaphod's the only one who really knows that they're going to Magrathea.
Well, technically, Trillian does too. She said, "I think I found what you were looking for." She's aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
Never mind then.
Yeah. And Ford doesn't think the place exists, like most of the people in the galaxy. And Arthur has no clue what's going on whatsoever. Magrathea, is that a new branch of Manchester?
I do like how the beginning of chapter 14 kind of just described everything and how its crew of four were ill at ease, knowing that they had been brought together not of their own volition, but by some simple coincidence, or by some curious perversion of physics, as if relationships between people were susceptible to the same laws that govern the relationships between atoms and molecules. I was like, you just diluted it down to a very scientific idea, and okay then.
Which, not entirely true, but
Yeah,
I like the principle they're going with.
yeah.
While the laws of physics are consistent, they interact with things differently depending on the scale of what's involved.
Yeah.
But then again, this is the same book that says people's lives are dictated by a phone number. So,
Yep. So we can't really take it too much to stock.
let's see. So, was there anything that really stood out to anybody other than that, unless you wanted to expand on that? But I think we pretty much already talked about that notion.
Eddie the computer and how I already hate him.
Oh, yeah, who doesn't hate Eddie the computer? He almost sounds like a car
Hi,
salesman.
gang. This is getting real sociable, isn't it? Shut up, said Zaphod, and show up.
See, every time he yells at Eddie, it makes me like Zaphod even more. And I shouldn't like Zaphod, all things considered, but every time he yells at Eddie, it's just like, I'm warming up to you, man.
Rotate the angle and don't talk about it.
do like how whenever they get into the Horsehead Nebula, it's like they can't see anything on the screen because it's.
Yeah, I was about to bring that up.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, think, man, where else would you see nothing on the screen? And I'm just thinking to myself when he asked that, it's like, well, literally any place where light's not able to shine through.
Yeah, but in
which is
like you have
a good chunk of the universe.
Yeah, like in space, it's kind of hard to like really say that like there's actual dark unless you're in something that is completely dark. But if you're like in the vastness of space, there's always going to be light. So it's like to find a place where it's just pure dark.
Yeah, but then there's also limits of lenses and stuff. Like our eyes are still, unless you have like an adjustment problem, need glasses. On a whole, our eyes are still better than any lens we've come up with. And you can say, well, maybe they have a better lens, but it's a matter of being able to capture light in. So if they were on like the edge spiral of a galaxy and they were facing outward and the next amount of light is just from some other distant galaxy, your eye might be able to pick up a glint of light, but maybe your lens might not be able to. And that's why we don't even use regular scoptics for radio telescopes and stuff. We use radio waves, infrared waves to pick up waves of light that our normal lenses wouldn't be able to see. But this is also Zaphod being kind of an idiot overall right here.
I think we can move on, maybe.
Probably.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything else.
There really
not
wasn't
much to say about that.
Like divulge from these chapters. I mean, chapter 15 kind of goes into a whole definition of, dude, once you created Magrathea and just how that came and just the lore behind it, or if you want to call it the lore, is pretty interesting because it sounds like what rich people will do.
Yeah.
I just don't know how you would ever get rich enough to afford a planet, to build a planet.
Oh. See. That's because you're only looking at money through the lens of what we limited to the fact that we're still on Earth. But there's people who have billions of dollars and could like build an island if they want to. There's been people who've tried and they're only just a little bit short right here. So if you start like scaling this up to the size of a galaxy, I mean, look at Star Wars. They basically built a small moon themselves. That was a ship for destruction. So what's to say that a rich enough empire couldn't just build planets? They could harvest all the material from, say, they have their explanation for that, harvesting the material, but even more realistically, they could harvest the material from asteroid belts throughout various solar systems and stuff such like that. And then just start condensing them into planetary structures. It's not that far-fetched of a thought. It's just thinking about how long it would take the society to get this big.
I mean, you have to think that with with societies that already have interplanetary travel or intergalactic travel, then the ability to make more and more money becomes a lot easier because you end up getting and selling materials that are available in other galaxies, and they'd be a lot easier to actually ship across and taking everything no longer limited by. This
seems to also be the way things are going too, because you look at the biggest powers right now. The biggest powers aren't governments; they're corporations. They're the money themselves. And if we ever even get to other places in space, it's probably going to be corporations that get us there. I mean, the amount of nickel that's in the asteroid belt alone is causing some corporations to want to colonize Mars just so we have a halfway point.
I mean, you already have government agencies putting restrictions on asteroid mining.
Yeah, but I mean, once they're in space, good luck doing anything about that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's always, with the vastness of space and everything, there's always new land to explore, and there's always new materials to gather, and there's always money to be made whenever there's still undiscovered locations. So it's like, of course, it makes sense that uh, intergalactic societies would end up making a lot more money because there's a lot more space to travel, a lot more materials to harvest, a lot more businesses to make, and it just, if you don't really have people who are screwing everything over, it just boosts everything up, which sounds like what happened. It's like, but you also had the people where it says in that second paragraph in 15, many men, of course, became extremely rich. This is perfectly natural and nothing to be ashamed of because no one was really poor, at least no one worth speaking of. And it's like, well, that sounds like the major part of history, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But, that's just also the natural course of a Pareto distribution, even if everybody started out equal, eventually the money's just going to shift around through trading naturally, even if you do it randomly.
Yeah.
And there's going to be some people who end up with the bulk of everything until it creates like a logarithmic curve down to the out at the bottom, the nothing.
Yeah. Some people are smart with their money and some people are dumb.
You don't even have to be malicious for things to turn the way that they do.
You just have to be smarter than the other person. And then it just goes on and it says, like, the richest and most successful merchants' life inevitably became rather dull and niggly, and they began to imagine that this was there for the fault of the world that they'd settle on. So it's like you're never really satisfied whenever you, like, it kind of does push the point, but it doesn't really like sin on it or dwell on it. It just kind of like notifies us, like, you can have as much money as you want and you're going to be bored, and then that ends up just creating a brand new industry where they just want to create planets. So it's like,
yeah, and
it's new industry.
And that's why you have to keep challenging yourself, because people, and I'm sure other species would be this way too, just from the nature of how Darwinian evolution works. And if you find something on some other planet that doesn't go through Darwinian evolution, then you can start criticizing it. But until then, it's the only model that actually works for everything.
Yeah.
Things suffer. And the things that get over the suffering survive and create more of themselves. And eventually, over time, the best qualities, or for the most part, the best qualities of them end up sticking through. So we're kind of creatures designed to struggle.
Yeah.
At least to some extent. And without the struggle, then our life kind of loses its meaning.
The whole thing, like the whole question of like how successful you can be in life is no longer about like how much you can actually obtain. It's whether or not you suffer well.
Yeah.
This went on a really deep tangent regarding completely fictional planets.
That's why richer societies tend to have higher depression and suicide rates than poorer societies.
Yeah, they've succeeded.
But and then you have to ask, like,
when you hit a level, when you hit a level of comfort, when your food is available and your other basic needs are met, then you go over to the, I forget what that's called, but that like pyramid of needs, human, and if each section is satisfied, then you just keep going up that, and then up at the top is more like fulfillment in life and emotions and stuff like that.
Which is a lot harder to meet.
Yeah.
It's better when you're struggling to get food and stuff, because at least that's a goal that you can rationally meet for the most part.
Because you're too busy trying to get what you need to survive to even think about how you feel about it.
And there's a point where you can actually live so comfortable that you completely forget how to actually like deal with any hardships or suffering. Because I mean, like, even today with the whole quote unquote gas shortage that's going on, it's like there's really even a gas shortage. Just the rumor of it went through, and like streets are being blocked off because people are just sucking gas out of the system. And it's like you're actually creating the gas shortage.
Mm-hmm.
You know what's funny too? This reminds me. Does anybody remember around the time before Y2K?
Oh yeah.
And all the crazy stuff. And there was the water shortage, and everybody was just loading up on bottles and bottles and bottles and jugs and gallons of water.
I remember filling up the tub.
Yeah, and there was like no water in the stores. You could back then Kmart was the bigger store that was here in town. You could go to Kmart and there was no water on their shelves. Why do you think there's going to be a water shortage? Just because some idiot on the TV mentioned that there might? Did you actually bother to look into any of this stuff?
it's that whole like potential fear that the thing that you're so accustomed to having unlimited access to at any time of the day isn't going to be there anymore. So you might as well get everything while you can. And it just ends up screwing a lot of other people, and it kind of screws you as well, because now you've only created, like, your unlimited resource has just become a lot more limited because now you actually have a finite number to it. And I get the whole self-sustaining thing, but it's like, well, yeah. Don't know where
and there was also the I think one of the things that led up to it in the 90s had a lot to do with it was the whole stay hydrated campaign.
Yeah.
And like, I understand for washing clothes and stuff, you need water, but you can go out and get dirty river water, boil that, and then clean your clothes with it. No problem. In fact, you can drink it after it's boiled too. But there is this like really complete jargon that was just pushed around, propaganda basically, that the only way you could stay hydrated was by drinking pure water.
No.
Which isn't the furthest from the truth.
And wouldn't that be around the time that they were claiming eight cups of water a day?
Yeah, 8 to 10 cups, which is ridiculous. You can actually have more problems from overhydrating yourself than under.
Mm-hmm.
That's if you don't pee, though. If you just like keep it all in your stomach.
And another problem was the fact that everybody had really busy days, so people weren't peeing.
Yeah. Man, we've done a lot of stupid things with the modern age has just created a lot of stupid things.
Yeah, which makes you really reflect on chapter 15 more and more. I think even though it's only 2 pages, this is probably the densest chapter of information thinking about it.
Like, I'm pretty sure that if we ever got to the point of intergalactic travel, we would, in fact, be making our own planets within a short matter of time.
You know what I would do? If I was alive? I'd start up a business for destroying people's planets. Because, you need a wrecking crew for everything. Well, they need space for new planets, especially if everybody moves off it. If you're making new planets... I mean, all the time, it's just like new houses.
That's kind of how Arthur and Ford are kind of in the predicament that they're in right now.
Yeah.
Someone destroyed the planet.
Yeah, well, their problem was, too, that people were still living on it.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I'd do it more in, like, the deconstruction business. Is like, nobody lives here anymore. We need to build a new planet because this one's not as interesting as it used to be. So you're going to pay me to destroy this planet so you can build a new, more interesting, I don't know, pretzel-shaped planet, even though that's physically improbable. Would have gravity wells in the loops between them that would cause people to fall in on the other side. Whatever. Hey, it's your planet. I'm just here to destroy the previous one.
There you go. You're just going to have like a little sign that's like on the side of one planet or something that's like, we destroy your condemned planets.
Yeah. We'll destroy planet for cash. How much cash? It's going to be a lot of cash.
Wow, that was a lot more of a conversation than I figured.
That was a big tangent for 1 page.
Yeah,
but the interesting thing too was, all this happened with Magrathea, and they were making luxury planets for people, but then it ended up they got so rich that everyone else was in abject poverty, and Magrathea just kind of went into obscurity, and now it's to the point where people don't even believe it exists.
Yeah. No, I do have an issue with that though, because that's not how society works.
Yeah, I was thinking of that too. It's like, well, how can you have this really rich planet that's making planets and no one believes it now?
But, well, no, not even just that, because that could have been, who knows, 1 billion years ago. What I was getting at was everybody in abject poverty. It's like, yes, you do end up with like basically a zero-sum game, but in societies where people get richer and richer, because we have the richest society there's ever been, the poverty line goes up. So even if you have no money, you being in poverty might still be better than a king was a couple thousand years ago.
I don't know.
So it really depends on the definition of abject poverty.
I mean, you could also argue the fact that somebody could have just done something remarkably stupid that it just bottomed everybody out to where the value of the planet was absolutely worthless.
At the end of it, yeah, I could see that. I'm talking more of like, as they're saying, if everybody was in abject poverty except for them, it's like, well, they still have money, but then their money bottomed out at the end. My complaint is that I don't think everybody would be in abject poverty. There'd be a lot of people at the 0 mark, but because of the nature of the logarithmic curve that would happen, you would still have enough, like, even upper lower class people that are just living their everyday lives.
Well, I mean, that's kind of how this is. Like, you had Magrathea, that one planet that became the richest planet in the galaxy, and then the rest of the galaxy ended up going into abject poverty. It's like all the richest ended up being on Magrathea.
Yeah, but that'd also be like saying all the richest people moved to New York.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean the rest of the world is awful. You know, because there's still like farming places. So even if everybody was in poverty, you're trying to say that, well, there's obviously going to be crop production, farming on other planets and stuff. It's a very extreme case of putting things, which is as improbable as everything else in this book.
I mean, I think the stupid thing is that we're trying to
critique a fictional section.
Like, perfect logic regarding a highly improbable book. So
yeah.
That's us being dumb.
Well, the problem with books like this, too, is you really have to think, it's like, what is a critique of society and what is an actual joke? Because a lot of these things, it's a very fine line between understanding what was just a joke that was thrown in and what was actually there to try to say this is what's wrong with society today. Trouble figuring out whether certain parts are just like quick little jokes and if things are actual jabs at how things are going on.
You want to move on?
Yeah, we can move on all you want. I don't care. I'm just talking.
I'm just laughing at the silence.
Oh.
Of course, that does lead us to the last chapter for this section.
Oh, yeah.
Where
we talk about how everything's a fairy tale.
Yes.
Arguing about whether or not it actually exists, despite the fact that they're looking at it.
Yeah. Well, they didn't know if it was Magrathea or not.
Yeah.
They're like, how do you know? We don't even the sun's not even visible right now.
Yeah.
That'd be like saying you're trying to find India and you wash onto Haiti and be like, this is India. It's like, well, how do we know it's India? It could be any shore. No, this is India. This is where it's supposed to be.
I do like the names of the twin stars, though, and just how Zaphod makes it remarkably magical, even though everybody else is like, I don't care. Like, you have Ford, who's remarkably skeptical of the entire thing, and Trillian and Arthur, who are pretty, like, blindsided towards it because they don't have a full understanding of what it is. And then you just have Zaphod, who is like a kid in a candy store.
Yeah. That was another thing I was laughing at, too, is like how magical this moment was. And yeah, it's kind of magical, the fact that this is somehow existing inside of a nebula. Because you would think the gravity of the star would pull most of the gas into it and start burning brighter and faster, and who knows how quick until it would die compared to other stars. But
there's
suspending that belief, the fact that like binary star systems are more common than not. Majority of the stars you see in the sky, because they're so far away and there's the binary systems are so close to each other, you can't tell them apart from being single stars. They're just bright lights. But there are more binary star systems than not, based on the nature of how stars form. And more of the singular systems are like a star that ended up consuming its twin while it was forming. But there are parts of this that make it really magical and strange, especially the fact that this is all existing inside of a nebula. And it's there should be wonderment here, but everybody's just like, eh.
Are you sure it's Magrathea? Or Arthur's just
is a planet as it is, too.
Oh. But then wasn't, I think Ford was like, how do you even know they'd be in there? Like, it doesn't look like anyone's there. Well, they could be underground. I mean, this is just them figuring out if it is, but I like how it ends too, of like, just from the author's perspective of, let's just get this straight. Yes, it is Magrathea. They're squabbling over here, but you need to know. Yeah, it is. Also, there's going to be a bowl of petunias, but that'll be later.
Oh, yeah, yes, that moment.
Was that listed in the last book?
Yeah, they mentioned it.
Yeah,
they mentioned it at the end. And
I like how he's like, a deadly missile attack shortly to be launched by an ancient automatic defense system will result in the breakage of 3 coffee cups and a mouse cage, the bruising of someone's upper arm, and the untimely creation and sudden demise of a bowl of petunias and an innocent sperm whale. And to continue the mystery, we will not tell you who breaks their arm or bruises their arm.
Yeah.
It's like, that's not even like the one question I'm asking.
Really?
I don't know. It's a question I'm asking.
But whose arm? I don't care about the bowl of petunias.
I do kind of care about the 3 coffee cups.
The 3 coffee cups.
I did end up like reading the other chapters, and I got really frustrated that it didn't actually like explain whose arm was bruised. I was like, dang it.
You knew this was going to be set up for nothing.
Got me.
Well, just like other parts of the book, it gives you unnecessary details.
But that's what I love about it, because so far they've been giving you details that are necessary and details that aren't necessary at the same time. Mm-hmm. So Douglas is still kind of just like, hey, I don't know, follow along. You might need this information, you might not. Keep it all in your head anyway. I'm wasting your space. It's almost to the point that like Adams is like a teacher and be like, yeah, I'm not going to tell you what's on the test. Just kind of keep notes on everything.
It may be important. There are mice here. They may be important, but you don't know yet.
Oh, yeah. You know what? I'll even spoil it for, like, not telling the ending, but yes, those mice are important.
They are important.
I remember from the movie.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for anybody who's watching this or reading this for the first time as they go through, like, yes, those mice are important. Just to give you some, like, brevity of all of this, some relaxation in the moment. Like, yes, don't worry. You do need to pay attention to those mice.
The last animals other than humans from the earth.
And arguably, they might be smarter.
Oh, and that Arthur doesn't even get his tea.
Yeah, he doesn't.
At least not in this chapter.
But he needs it.
We have to wait another week for Arthur to get his tea.
I could use some tea.
Well, and now this is because it was before that they were like trying to sleep and stuff. So finally it's Friday, or the equivalent of wherever they are.
Who knows? It could be Friday. It could still be Thursday. It could be next June, you know, whatever.
That's something I always thought was weird about space travel. With like, especially watching Firefly or something. It's like, we're going to get there at this time on this day. It's like, but time is relative on different planets.
Yeah.
And then they would even.
Well, that's why star dates, because the whole Federation keeps by on star date. And you'd be like, well, if you keep relativity in mind, you know how fast light travels, and if you know how fast light travels, then you can also take predictive measures on how warp speed is going to affect it, because you can judge by like, okay, when are we going to get here via warp based on how fast light would get here? And then you could judge how much time has actually passed, and you could keep calendars on individual planets if they were already known planets. But I mean, with improbability involved, who knows? It could be last Sunday before the Earth exploded, for all we know. Man, it kind of makes me want to actually have an improbability drive, just to push the button to see what happens.
I want to bet something improbable.
Probably.
Most likely. Very probably.
Just guessing.
Yeah. Well, it's a fine estimate, just, you know.
Or something very probable, because that's how improbable it is.
Yeah, so probable that even improbability could not have predicted it. And the probability said that the coin landed on heads. So actually, I think that's, you know, pretty light chapters, and we filled a decent amount of time. About a, what, little over half an hour or so. I don't know, I'm not really paying attention to the time.
It's been a while.
Yeah. I don't really want to stress us to stretch this because there's not
a whole
too
bunch.
much to really cover.
No.
I mostly picked it based on a page length. I didn't want to cram too many chapters in together because I didn't want us to just rush through the end of the book.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing as a couple chapters aren't that short, I figured to make it easy, even, we'll probably just read through 20.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, so anybody who's watching this, now we're in the future. Next week is 17 through 20. Or I guess maybe next few minutes for you if you click onto the next video in the playlist. I'm really bad with this future time thing. And we will we'll see you later. Find out what happens to these bowl of petunias. That would be a shame if you didn't.